What's going on, guys? So, recently, as I'm sure you've seen, liberals, Democrats, progressives, the left, what have you, are speculating as to why Kamala lost this election, as though it weren't already obvious. But also, people have turned their gaze toward 2028. They want to know what's going to happen after this Trump presidency, they want to know the future. They want to see in that crystal ball what's going to happen. Well, we're going to be answering both of those questions in this video. And before we get down to it, I would like you to consider giving this video a like, sharing it, subscribing, and scrolling down into the description and subbing to me on Patreon for other benefits. Let's jump right in. So, to get a good sense of why they lost, beyond the fact that Democrats ran the least popular candidate in American history, let's take a look at three schools of thought. Three reactions that liberals and Democrats had to the outcome of this election. First, now the first opinion has been expressed by Ragin' Cajun James Carville, a prominent and very competent Democrat political strategist. He said that wokeness, meaning blue state cultural values, essentially lost Democrats the election. In this view, a pivot to the center would be necessary for Democrats to recover from their current defeat. This is the more threatening option of Democrat strategy at the moment because it's easy to see how people could get fooled into thinking the left is capable of genuine reform, which it is not, or that it's fine if they stay home in 2028. Both of those factors could potentially cost the GOP the election in 2028. However, much of the MSM seems to be attempting to put this more moderate face on, like CNN adding pro Trump commentator Scott Jennings to their roster, which was previously unthinkable. But some of the problems for this moderate strategy are that it was ultimately the economy and not social issues which won Trump the election. Millions of Americans saw that the Biden presidency was hurting their wallets. And if Democrats do take this more moderate turn, they won't have the alarmism of the culture war to mobilize their progressive base, and nothing to cover up their obviously terrible economic policies. As an example, a lot of people have already noted the supposedly paradoxical phenomenon where in several states, many voters chose Trump as well as more liberal measures on abortion if that happened to be on their ballot. Progressives and liberals and leftists can't wrap their minds around this, but no, the specter of a total abortion ban by Trump doesn't loom large over the minds of most Americans. They know that's a ridiculous scaremongering tactic. However, abortion was a key motivating issue of the Democrat Party. So if most Americans are no longer concerned and the abortion issue is given back to the states, that leaves the question of what moderate Dems even really have to run on at this point. That's kind of where this strategy runs into problems. The social issues are meant to distract people from the economic reality. But if they're unwilling to change the economic reality and they no longer have the social issues they need because, again, a lot of what they were saying was just scaremongering, then what do moderate Dems really have to run on at this point? They don't really have anything. They don't have a very compelling case. However, there is a second school of thought, which I think the Democrat Party is more likely to go with. Rather than admit fault, they would prefer to say nothing was wrong to begin with. Second, this was a view expressed by Jon Stewart and John Oliver, and it's an easy argument to make. Wokeness couldn't have been the problem because Kamala was the perfect candidate, according to them, and she ran a campaign where she shifted significantly to the right. Kamala even said she was a gun owner during her debate with Donald Trump after previously having said she would support a mandatory gun buyback. This fooled progressives and leftists like John Oliver and Jon Stewart, but not real Americans like you and I. Anyway, this line of thinking says that the left did nothing wrong economically in America and that incumbent parties suffered losses across the West, with basically every incumbent party losing elections in Europe due to complex economic factors like supply chain issues that caused inflation. Basically, they were bound to lose no matter what they did because the economy wasn't doing well in some areas. And if voters feel the economy is bad, they're just going to blame whoever is in office. And Democrats happen to be office in that time, so Democrats are the ones who get blamed, and that's why they lost. Therefore, a change in Democrat strategy is unnecessary. A lot of people, there was this poll, this is what some people are saying. A lot of people even seem to want to run Kamala again, as ridiculous as that is. Although I ultimately don't think that the Democrat Party will be foolhardy enough to try that. But what they are deluded enough to do, however, is run a campaign with a Kamala 2.0. A campaign that uses the exact same messaging with the same promises by a similar candidate, perhaps even Tim Walz, who now wants to try his hand at a presidential bid, as ridiculous as that sounds. I have no idea why he thinks he has the chops to face down Vance after that debate they had where it looked like he was going to explode. But to me, this appears to be the most likely path that Democrats will take. Basically, a Kamala 2.0, as it is essentially doubling down, which we know they have to do in order to protect their own utopian worldview. They cannot admit that the Biden presidency was terrible, and Americans don't want that. Anyway, this could spell calamity for the Democrats because unless Trumpism is discredited economically by continued inflation or other issues, it will almost certainly yield them another loss in 2028. For this strategy to even be successful, we would need a Trump presidency so bad that people are suddenly looking back to the Biden presidency as this halcyon of good times, which I simply do not see happening. America just collectively decided that round two of Trump was better than a round two of Biden. Vance, being intelligent, ideologically committed, and already gaining rapidly in popularity, would be seen as a Trump 2.0 and will likely mop the floor with whoever Democrats choose as their candidate in 2028. Democrat shot callers have actually begun to believe their own nonsense, and this lack of strategic thinking can be seen in the fact that Kamala literally is a DEI candidate who was expressly chosen by Biden not for any electoral advantage that she gave or competency as a politician, but for identity politics reasons because she was a woman of color. Blunders like this are, in my opinion, features and not bugs of our system, and basically need to continue due to the internal logic of the managerial state. Because, as I was alluding to before, there's no easier means, there's no alternative way of expropriating Americans' wealth without the distraction of the culture wars. This is why progressives are propped up. This is why you have them advocating for these increasingly ridiculous social policies, all these random changes, this gender, that gender, what have you. And running a campaign exactly like they did last time with Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom or Tim Walz as their candidate will be terrible. It will blow up in their faces all over again for all of the reasons I've mentioned. Vance would absolutely destroy them. But third, this is the third school of thought. It's not expressed by anyone of consequence on the left, so you can't seriously expect it to be put into practice like the other two schools of thought. You can't expect the Democrat Party to actually go down this path. But I've heard people like the streamer Hassan say this, the socialist streamer Hassan. He said Kamala lost because she didn't run far enough to the left. The streamer Vaush also expressed similar sentiments and said Bernie Sanders would have won the election in 2016, which is ridiculous. This basically takes that observation, that faulty observation made by Jon Stewart that I mentioned earlier, that wokeness wasn't the cause of the election because Kamala and Democrats generally ran to the right, and then dials it up to 11. So now this is identified as one of the main reasons why Kamala lost, because she ran to the right. Ridiculous, I know. Needless to say, this is completely absurd. And the important takeaway from this election is that high income whites are corporate Democrats or progressives who are content to be distracted by the bread and circuses of left wing social causes and identity politics. A candidate who is potentially serious about implementing free healthcare would get crushed in the suburbs. Not to mention Sanders, who is an openly non Christian socialist. But I mean, even if Kamala had really decided to go mask off, America would not be interested in a progressive California senator, let alone a Vermont socialist. The issue is that if Sanders were to run, or a candidate like Sanders, you might pick up a couple Hispanics who are drawn in by the promise of free healthcare. But as I said before, you would totally lose the suburbs. You would totally lose high income whites. And I think what we saw with a lot of the weird, gross stuff that was happening during the Harris campaign, them parading Liz Cheney around Michigan, Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney's father, coming out in support of Harris, all these neocons coming out in support of Harris. We really saw them trying to draw in neocon support because they thought they could drive their numbers up with high income whites high enough that they would be competitive. And that simply did not happen. It simply did not happen. And the lesson to be learned here is that the progressive coalition is breaking apart, and the Democrats could not effectively fit Hispanics and high income whites into the same coalition to the point that it could afford them an electoral victory. You already see this all over online, all over these online spaces of liberals, leftists, insane progressive Redditors complaining about the voting behavior of Hispanic men this election, because Hispanic men, Latino men, broke even for Trump. And I've been predicting this for over 4 years. If you're new to this channel, you're just a new subscriber. We have the biggest predictions. We have the best predictions on this channel. You can go see the other two election predictions. Our predictions are winning bigly. We have the best predictions on the internet. We have the best predictions on YouTube. They're based in science. They're based in empirical, observable reality. If you continue to follow this channel, you'll tell your friends what you heard on this channel. You'll never be wrong. It's perfect here. It's perfect. We've got all of it down to a science. But aside from being the best political channel on YouTube, I predicted that Hispanics would eventually lean rightward because Hispanics actually occupy a lot of the same vocations that working class white people do. Hispanics are effectively union Dems, and they have just taken a little while longer to shift toward the right because the Democratic Party is screwing this country over by sending jobs overseas. And Hispanics are beginning to correctly recognize their material interests, that Democrats are not the party of the working class anymore. And that's why they've begun to vote rightward. But to appeal to these people, Democrats would actually have to pivot to the left again and begin. They'd have to choose a Sanders or a Sanders-like candidate and begin promising these people free health care, which we just know they won't do because that, as I already stated before, would lose them high-income whites. So Democrats right now are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the only thing that could even possibly catapult them back into being a viable party would be some sort of moderate candidate running after an economic catastrophe over the next 4 years. And the Democrats will try to sabotage government. They will try to ruin the economy and then use that to discredit Trump, as evil as that sounds. They are not beyond that. This will be their strategy. You already have that guy planning some sort of shadow cabinet to stop Trump. They're going to try and screw up this presidency, but God willing, they will not be successful. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. For a lot of you newer viewers to my channel, this is some of my commentary. This is normally what I do on this channel. Shout out to one of my original followers and my first Patreon sub, General Jack Ripper. Been there since day one. Please join him in subbing to my Patreon for magical benefits and more of this wonderful, wonderful Make America Great Make America Great Again content. And Red Channels will catch you in the next one.